I think it's one of those things where I was a CTO back to back for roughly just under 5 years, sort of 2019 to 2024, 3. And I think now I've had a couple of years distance from it. Sometimes it's nice to have that benefit of hindsight, be able to look back at a passage of your life and think, okay, I'm now ready to, or it would be cool to kind of document that and go through it and catalog it in my head. And yeah, I kind of put a few feelers out, mostly on LinkedIn actually, and just had a bunch of other CTOs reach out and say, like, if this was my first week on the job, like, here's all the stuff I would have loved to have heard about. And I figured, yeah, there's got to be some lessons I can kind of pull out from 5 years of just chaos.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of CTO Confidential. I am here with Ben Howdle, who is the author of The First CTO, a new book coming out that he has written. And I mean, the title does all the introduction you need. I think that you guys know why I'm having him on the show here. The First CTO, what an awesome title. I know you would said online that you had hoped for something very similar to Kitchen Confidential, which is awesome. You know, the Anthony Bourdain book. I always say, you know, software is a little bit more boring than being in kitchens. You know, there's quite a bit of personal excitement because having worked in restaurants. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, starting right off, what's the inspiration for the book? Where did you come up with the idea?
Gosh, the idea were quite layered. Few kind of selfish personal reasons, few just, I think this hopefully could be interesting to people. I think it's one of those things where I was a CTO back to back for roughly just under 5 years, sort of 2019 to 2024, 3. And I think now I've had a couple of years distance from it. Sometimes it's nice to have that benefit of hindsight, be able to look back at a passage of your life and think, okay, I'm now ready to, or it would be cool to kind of document that and go through it and catalog it in my head. And yeah, I kind of put a few feelers out, mostly on LinkedIn actually, and just had a bunch of other CTOs reach out and say, like, if this was my first week on the job, like, here's all the stuff I would have loved to have heard about. And I figured, yeah, there's got to be some lessons I can kind of pull out from 5 years of just chaos and stuff like that. So, there was that kind of reason. More personally, again, I've always written blog posts since I pretty much started. I started sort of 2010, and everything I learned, I just kind of wrote about, even if it was really simple to other people. I just kind of put it all out there. So I've built up a sort of decent practice of blogging over the years, but never in this long form. So I figured there may be a way to structure stuff in a way that could serve as lessons and takeaways and stories for a brand new CTO who could have something in their, hopefully physical hands one day, but digital to begin with, that might help them on the first week, because I would have loved just someone to just give me something, like, not even like a blueprint, just stories that I could kind of read and go, oh, okay, it's not so crazy to feel like that. So yeah, there was a bunch of reasons why I thought, okay, now's the time to do it.
Very, very cool. That's, you know, it's interesting you bring up the idea of the first CTO. And when you first started, you know, I tell people, because I sometimes do fractional CTO work, and people kind of ask, like, oh, I say, you know, one of the things that there's such a wide variety of types of CTOs, in the sense that I don't think I could be the CTO of, like, IBM, you know, which is like a totally different style. A lot of people, when they think of a CTO, they're thinking, oh, like GE has a CTO and like Amazon has a CTO. But then there's like this concept of, I'm sure there's a first week of being a CTO there, but then there's the CTO of a startup, which is a very different position. So when you came into those startups, were you also like the first builder? Were you or were you very hands-on, or did you come into a team? How did it start?
That's the thing. I actually got interesting pushback. That's the thing, when you put stuff out on the internet, obviously you're going to get like lots of different feedback and pushback. And I think one person described my role as, well, you kind of sound like more like a founding engineer. And that's actually the kind of mess I wanted to dig into, was that, you know, when it's a brand new startup and there's two of you, or maybe three of you, then I was going to be the one that was just taking all the technical stuff. So all the tech stuff was kind of my remit, and then the business and the operation stuff was the other co-founders. Yeah, there is that kind of messy I guess it kind of depended, was less important of the title itself. It was like, okay, I was a CTO, but I was sort of the founding engineer and a co-founder, and all these different titles kind of squished into one. Whereas, a big established company, you might come in and that's a very strict, job spec, and you're walking into a kind of familiar structure. But when you don't have like a GitHub repository, you don't have anything, it's all quite messy and unquantifiable. Yeah, you kind of divvy out job titles, and I was a CTO. Yeah, so it kind of encompassed just everything to do with the tech. Whereas, a different company, it might encompass different things and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's very messy and fluid to begin with.
Very cool. Yeah, because, it's funny. The first time I found myself in a very similar situation, I was working at an agency, and effectively, I just ended up being the last engineer standing, and ended up finding like, you're the most senior person. You're the head of technology now. Like that was it. And like you and like, oh, but we still need you to develop stuff and do all these leadership roles. And so I think I figured that would be the number one criticism. Just looking at your post, right? Like without even reading the comments, someone's going to come in and be like, you weren't just a manager, like you're also contributing. That's not proper CTO work. But I think it's way more common, because now that I've been in the industry, you go to these meetups, it is way more common for this case, which is you are the CTO / founding engineer.
Yep.
You end up in the position as opposed to applying for a CTO position.
Yep.
And you have to do both. And that's kind of the surprising part.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the first one, I wasn't going to be the CTO, and the founder I'd worked with a bunch of times before. Like I'd worked with startups of his that then got acquired, and I'd kind of then followed to, bigger companies to kind of integrate stuff. And I think from his point of view, I'd never actually expressed an interest in being a CTO or leadership or management. So I felt like I was ready. I was looking to bring to an end like a passage of kind of contracting for various companies and consulting, and to get my teeth in something. And he's an ideas person, and I always kind of listen when he talks about ideas and stuff. And he said, I'm starting a company, like after your contract finishes, like don't take anything else, like please like jump aboard this. So I was in on the idea, and I think as we were sort of forming it and putting the team together, I said, oh, can I be the CTO? And his response was, well, you can, like you've never expressed that before. So I think it was more of an internal thing for me. I was like, okay, like it's a title I've never had before. It's definitely like a new chapter I want to jump into. But without it was quite a naive jump in terms of the title specifically. I just kind of figured, right, I'm gonna give myself the title via everyone agreeing, and then I'll try and figure out how to grow into that, versus having like a specific idea of what it would entail.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting idea, like the idea of growing into it, because even just founding your own company, when my co-founder and I started this, it was like just very natural. He's like, well, you'll be the CTO, I'll be the CEO. We have to put it on the paperwork. Like we need, and we're not going to hire somebody to do that. And I would almost argue like the CTO of, let's say, an IBM or a Dell would not be a great CTO for your startup. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, we had that exact conversation about like people we were hiring, was that I've worked at sort of bigger companies and smaller companies and startups, and yeah, I think there are certain skills and personality traits that just suit an early scrappy stage startup more than a more established company. And yes, I don't think the CTOs of either end would particularly not even sort of suit, just would actually probably dislike potentially the opposite end of their spectrum. I quite like that early stage, scrappy kind of wearing lots of hats. Like looking back at it, I'm like, oh, it was like I was sort of thriving in it. It was challenging. It was rewarding. It was hellish. Like it was everything. But yes, I think another person coming from like a bigger established company might think, well, where's all the order? This is it's like too chaotic. I need some form of sanity. So yeah.
Cool. Very. So it's what I would ask you too. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit. How did you first get into software engineering? Going even far further back now. Like what were your earliest job experiences like? What was that path like?
Gosh, so I left. So I was 18 in. So over in the UK, we have high school, then we have what we call college, and then we would go on to university age 18. And I did finished high school at 16. I did 2 years of what we call college, and then I decided. I mean, I scraped through going to college just from like a just a work ethic point of view. Like I was falling behind and stuff. I was giving myself extra work because I had to retake exams and stuff. And I thought, whoa, like if I'm gonna go to university, and I've just scraped through this, like I can just see myself mounting on the debt. I didn't really have a particular career path in mind. So I carried on working. So I decided not to go to university with no idea of what the alternative would be. So I carried on working my kind of retail, like store job that I was working. But my dad had his own business, and he was working. He was an electrical engineer at the time, and they were building these big automation systems. So they began like to factories and kind of doing all of their control panel automation work. So a little bit more towards tech than what I was doing at the time. And I'd always used computers, and he'd always brought home computers to kind of take apart and see how they work, and got very au fait with operating Windows at a young age and whatever. I'd always been used to computers, but honestly, the idea of code or programming, it wasn't even like it was an alien concept to me. I just didn't have it on my radar. It wasn't. I didn't know what I didn't know about. I never questioned why this computer was able to work. So he was like, "Well, if you want to come over and basically work, and you can kind of as a bit of like a leapfrog from your kind of store retail work to doing something and maybe just expose you to different things." So I essentially was doing, I was shadowing, I was doing physical panel wiring. I was going down and working on control panels in factories and stuff, and also taking care of like the office admin or the IT stuff, setting up Windows small business server. And then I looked at their website and they said, look, we've had this old crappy website. Do you want to just take a look at it and see what you can do? So that was genuinely the first kind of venture into it. It was a combination of I was doing very industrial screen design for factory workers to kind of press buttons and see levels and gauges and dials move, and then also looking at the website, which happened to be, it was probably WordPress back then. Just kind of getting into the internals of, oh, there's this thing called WordPress, and that led me down another Google search, and oh, there's this thing called PHP. So the kind of the accumulation of those two things, I then started to get more involved with trying to do more stuff with websites and displaying like data from systems and stuff. So a really like weird industrial route into programming and coding, which then sort of found WordPress and LampStack, and yeah, just started building projects at home. I was massively into 24, the series, if you remember it, but I built like a Jack Bauer quote generator. Like I did all this nonsense of just building projects for the hell of like learning stuff and posting about it. And ended up getting like an agency job 18 months later. And left there, and that was full time. So then I was building websites for an agency. But yeah, I always felt like it was a really weird route into websites and coding and programming. So yeah, it's odd.
My route was very similar, and well, one of the reasons I ask though is because one of the surprises for me as a CTO is that, and I could just tell, I knew your story was going to be like this, because I said, like there's this transition that happens where you have to, everyone thinks like, oh, the CTO might be the best programmer on the team. And I'm like, actually, they kind of have to be the best salesperson on the team. And and there's this like human aspect. And a lot of folks that I found who are CTOs, fractional CTOs, come from retail backgrounds,
Yeah.
restaurant service backgrounds, because they're somehow able to blend the two worlds together. And it sounds like I worked in agencies, did the website thing and worked with the customers, and it feels like that's the surprise that people don't realize. They're like, actually, that's the reason they're the CTO.
Yeah, no, I it took me a while to admit, because I definitely led with a lot of ego stuff. More like an imposter syndrome thing. I wanted to be seen as the best programmer we had or on the team or whatever. But it took me a few years to kind of get comfortable with the fact that, oh no, actually I'm quite comfortable. I'm not the best programmer we'll have, or not the best systems architect we'll find. But just like a very useful blend of lots of different factors is where I can sit and be more be more useful, and then work with and hire those people who are just excellent at, those different areas. But yeah, no, I've also found a similar thing as well.
Yeah, because and that's another thing to reckon with, and I think that happens as your journey, right? You're kind of the founding engineer, you're writing all the code, you get very attached to it, but then you have this realization that you have to build you have to be a great team builder. You almost
Hmm.
have to be like a great coach.
Yep.
You think about like the great football coach. People look at these college football teams or something. They get paid millions of dollars, and it's like, well, why? I was like, well, because forming the team is
Hmm.
super hard. It's
Yep.
like because now you're like you said, it's not just enough to find the best systems architect. Is this the systems architect that's going to gel with everybody else I have
Yep.
going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
So
also tricky, when you sort of start in the company as well. Like every single person kind of have there's nowhere to hide. Like it's like the spotlight kind of thing. There's just a spotlight in everything. There's nowhere to blend in. So yeah, and you're adding people to a team which is maybe less than five, less than 10, and everyone has a major contribution, kind of reshaping that culture. And suddenly 3 hires later, and the culture can feel, it can feel different in like a great way. It's like suddenly we found like more people to gel, and it's like this thing is growing. Or it can go the other way, and like a couple of hires that just aren't a great fit can really affect like a culture. So yeah, those early hires are going to be pretty crucial.
yeah, so how did you go about kind of choosing the next hire? Like what was what was your interview process like to get the second engineer in there? If you're the first, and then how does that grow over time? How did you scale that? Yeah, I'd love to hear that process. How you pick a candidate.
Yeah, yeah. So the kind of boring answer to the first bit is where do you find them was me and the co-founder. We just combed back through our network. Like I came to the end. I wouldn't say I mean I had almost zero hiring experience before that, and I would say that I'm not the best hirer now. But I came to the realization that my gut is kind of like, can I stand to, or do I want to work with this person? Like when things are tough and like the hours might be long and things are going haywire, is this person going to be someone I can just work alongside? And for me personally, the technical skills are just a little below that. Like it has to be a fit there. So we went back through just our past colleagues, people we'd worked with, and just picked out people that we've enjoyed working with. Who might be mildly interesting in joining a startup for a brand new idea, and so that's where a lot of the first hires, or the second, third, fourth kind of hires came from, was a combination of our prior network or existing network. One thing we did do, which worked quite well, was we put together from this kind of past network, we reached out to people and put together almost like a tech. I think we called them the tech council. Sort of like an advisory board that I could ping questions off. They weren't involved like full time, part time. Even they were just available. And we had a couple of like hour long, just like face to face, well, it's like Google Meet kind of meetings. And I kind of came armed with my list of questions to kind of pepper to the group and see what the sort of feedback was. And from that group, I think I must have just enticed with my technical challenge problems. One of them just did a lot of talking, and his ideas were great. He was just great to talk to, great to work with. I'd never worked with him before, and he ended up. We followed up, and he joined. So he became the third hire. His role was technically, I think we settled on the CIO. So he was essentially the more DevOps infrastructure counterpart to me. So we kind of overlapped in the middle, but he took more of the DevOps infrastructure stuff. I took more of the application system architecture. So yeah, that first hire came from. I mean, we compensated. It was like a hourly rate kind of thing. But we just vested like a little bit of cash just to have their availability. And we didn't meet. I think we met twice and pinged a few async emails off to them. But yeah, I swear, out of that group, at least two ended up working for that startup. And the rest of them were just in situations they couldn't sort of walk away from. But yeah, people you like working with and you get on with, because it's going to be chaotic and frantic. So yeah, that was like a litmus test in the early days.
Oh, I really like that. Now it's probably easier than ever to almost do like a Slack channel type of thing,
Yeah,
and because just staying involved. you know, and there's a lot of really talented people out there that would love to do this kind of work. I always say that the startup environment is super fun. And like you said, some people can't quit their job, but they can definitely lend their advice. I too find the same thing. I try and hire out of my network. I definitely know, like, if you've ever read, I think it's The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Benjamin Horowitz one.
Yeah. It's a book I really like, but he does advise against this idea of like hiring from your gut. But I find that I kind of disagree with that advice. I know, yeah, I find the same as you, where I can ask a bunch of I know some people that are very into that, the leak code, the technical problems, and just from like a technical challenge. I tend to sort of, and maybe this is wrong, I tend to sort of say like, look, I'm just going to assume everything you said in your resume is true.
Yeah.
and you're not lying to me. Yeah. I was like, because I'm going to know right away, like, you know, because day one, I'm going to give you something, and we're going to find out right now if you know how to code or not. So, you know, I figure that part's true. It's all that other stuff of how do you think, how do you make decisions, how do you solve problems, how do you work with others, and I kind of hammer those questions a bit harder, and I'm looking for kind of real stories. And generally, now I think that's the opposite for junior hires because they don't have any stories.
Yeah.
But I do like them to tell me the non-tech story. I'm like, listen, talk to me about like where you worked in college. Now, increasingly, I've found that is like that's like a super rare thing that like most people don't do any work in, like they don't work anywhere in college.
No.
They just do college.
Yeah.
And that's made hiring very hard. And I can't underestimate that to people. Like the soft skills. Right?
Yeah. I had the same thing, like that first agency job I went for. Like I don't think I'd built a website, you know, commercially in any aspect other than, you know, friend to friend, or I basically I felt like I needed something to talk about. So I felt like if you just had something to talk about, and even if mine was, I mean, they'd found like my stupid Jack Bauer quote generator and like other stuff I'd done like that. So I thought, okay, well, if I need to break into this somehow. I'll take with me something to talk about. And I think I must have got it based on just giddy enthusiasm or something like that. Yeah, they were fine with that. There's just something I could kind of talk about that wasn't, you know, actual experience.
Yeah, it's really true. You just kind of, it's like anything to get kind of in the door and through, and those little, like that's what I've been encouraging a lot of younger folks now is, you know, that's like one of the biggest questions that I get out of the audience is like, I can't find a job, I can't get in front of the CTO. Are you hiring?
Yeah.
And for me, it's hard because, you know, I'm an agency. A little bit different than a startup in that, you know, like financially, I try and stay very small because it is, we are not in the burn money in the street days anymore. And so I'm curious too about this too, from the CTO's perspective. At what point during this journey does like the financials of the company start to come into play in your decision making? And was that kind of a shocking thing? How do you think about that?
That was one of the ways which there were a few kind of subtle ways that, you know, the dynamic of what I was doing shifted. I was still really hands-on, still loved building stuff. Like that was, you know, in large part, I mean, there was no tech, so there had to be some tech, and that was, you know, when there's just me, I had to like drive that forward. I thought, okay, this is my wheelhouse. I can do that. But then, you know, other factors and aspects show up that some were, you know, range from just completely out of my comfort zone, never thought about it or touched before, to kind of more subtle and just were more of an extension or progression of what I maybe had been doing. But the financials of the company, that was something I just never. I mean, when you're pulled in as a contractor or, you know, working full time, I guess the only kind of thing you kind of care about is there still enough money to kind of pay me so I can keep working here? Is there going to be a company tomorrow? And that's kind of it. That was all, you know, I was kind of worried about, like, is my salary going to come through? Will they pay this invoice? But I think being at the ground level of some of the discussions which I was just not au fait with having, you know, equity structure for new hires, or even equity structure for me personally, I just never really paid that much attention to it. So, and then being so close to the business, and seeing, you know, direct kind of effect or alignment between, like, do we want to hire this person now? Can we scrape by with, maybe you've got this council who are just being super benevolent with their time, and we can kind of utilize that for a little bit versus like a full-time hire. So yeah, thinking about those things it was alien to me. And I think the founder of the first company was, I was very curious about like the equity, and it suddenly felt a lot more meaningful than it had in the past. Not just either amount of equity, it's just, oh, this could actually become like this could actually be something. What might that mean for my future and me and stuff? So he laid it all out. And then that kind of, and he made it clear, like, your impact will directly contribute to, those different financial scenarios and timelines and things like that. So it then, that then tended to trickle down into more everyday decisions on, the classic kind of build versus buy. Do we sign up with this vendor for 12 months? Do we just do a monthly thing? Like all those kinds of decisions I'd never really had to think about before. So yeah, it played a massive part in just the decisions I was making, who we hired, when we hired, can we scrape by, like, do we really need that thing? Even like how I built stuff. So, do I want it to be the most optimized system from day one? Or do we need to get stuff out the door and just, it's a bit messy and it's a prototype but it's in a customer's hands, and that's great. And we can tidy stuff up and scale it and whatever. So yeah, I think I found then going into the second startup, I already almost had that pattern recognition kind of a little bit embedded, way more than I did in the first one, which I had none. And that was then helpful in kind of, okay, we can like optimize for, runway and like AWS budgets and things like that. So it was a bit more of a syntax, a language that I was a bit more familiar with by the time the second one rolled around. But yeah, that was a learning experience in itself, just even sort of bearing that in mind.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. You talk about like AWS budgets, things. It's very hard to estimate the costs of these like rented servers, and that's like one of the you almost kind of like see what the cost is, and you're like, is it good still or is it not good? You kind of have to be almost reactive.
Yeah,
because it's, oh man, I don't even know. Still don't have a great framework for estimating something like that.
No, and also like just different volumes, and like we knew that it was always gonna be a great thing if we had like plenty of people using it and stuff. But yeah, the different volumes we were working with, estimating was super hard. It was, like I said, it was more, okay, we have a build through. I mean, luckily, you can get quite generous free tiers and startup credits and things like that. But yeah, I became a lot more cost conscious as I directly saw it impacting like a month and year number. Like it was quite, everyone was on the same page. Like I felt like that was good transparency to have. Like right now we are 17 months away from like the runway ending, unless next round of funding or whatever. So having that kind of it was hard to get away from, but it was also then it kind of helped impact decisions that I might make going forward.
Yeah, I could see that. And then like for your second startup now, did you come in as the founding engineer at that point, or were you more, that was like, so the first one you kind of founded into CTO, the second one you kind of jumped in at a later point?
Yeah, they're kind of like different set of challenges and stuff. But the first one folded in like the end of, or the very start of 2024, I believe, or 3. I get mixed up between 23 and 24. They kind of blurred. It was the start of it was a start of a year in the last 3 years. That folded, and I thought, wow, I need I've just thrown 4 years into this. I need like a breather. So I watched lots of movies. I played lots of tennis. I just think I'm gonna just push out, looking for a job and stuff. And about 5-6 weeks in, I got a message, a DM from a founder based in New York, who just asked me if I wanted to stay in fintech. And I thought, yes, I think I do. I felt like because I'd poured so much into the first one, and it had folded before I really felt like it, hit its potential or something. I thought, yes, I do want to stay in fintech. Something dramatic about unfinished business or whatever. But yeah, I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's have a chat. So I think we talked like 2 hours later. I met him and the existing head of engineering. And he was very good. He was a classic founder, great at selling you on the story, like a really good storyteller. Sold me on the vision. I was like, okay, I'm in. It was helping freelancers pay tax, and I thought, very cool. I've been a freelancer. I struggled with like a spaghetti bank account, like just a mess everywhere. I was scrabbling every time I need to pay tax. And the app was like a modern solution to kind of managing that tax. So every time you need to pay tax, the money was there, it had all been swept aside ready, and that was it. So I thought, great, like I'm pretty much helping out like a past me or a current me or whatever. The next day I think I met, the head of iOS, because it was an iOS app, which was the product. But yeah, he said, like, we talked back and forth and said, like, you're interested? I said, I absolutely am. And I personally didn't really care, like, because they already had an existing team with a structure. They just launched, I think, on the App Store. The company had been going for just over a year. So everything was pretty much built. They were starting to, they'd have like the first 100 fanatical users, as they say. And I just said, look, I don't care what job title I come in as. I don't really mind about that. I just want to be involved. So I think I went in as senior software engineer. And I was back to pretty much contributing, just individual contributor, working in a structure. But I think all the stuff I learned from the first one, I think maybe sometimes annoyingly, I have a habit of sort of expanding within the role I'm in, just to kind of get involved in other stuff, which is helpful, but you sort of blur boundaries. And yeah, I think I just naturally sort of expanded in that role. And about 6 months in, I think the founder sort of spotted that maybe there might be like a vice versa situation where, the existing head of engineering might be great just to kind of not have to worry about the leadership stuff and purely focus on building, and then put me in the CTO spot. So yeah, that switch was, I felt like it was really awkward. I'm not sure how much of that was in my own head. But yeah, that was a strange dynamic to come in as a senior software engineer and then sort of swap, not even straight, promoted, but sort of swap with someone who was already in that. And on such a small team, you've got like 10 people. It's like
I could see that producing some bad blood. Like if that person was like, wait a minute, I thought I was doing a great job. And
yeah.
So, but it was amicable. Like they wanted to move
yes.
Or they quit a month later. No.
No, it was amicable. The guy is he's a great guy. Like he's super chill, far more chill than I am. He was really good about it. He said, like, I'm glad I don't have to worry about like like doing any leadership stuff anymore. I think he found himself in the spot where he was almost like kind of, I guess I'll do that role, but wasn't necessarily comfortable with a bunch of that stuff. So we were much happier in the swapped role. And then sort of it was well, no, it was probably about a year ago now. But I reached out and just said, like, that was pretty mental, like all that stuff back there. Like, are we cool? Like, have you got anything you want to like chat about it? He said, no, it's all good. It's like I've been around startups for years now, and I'm like things chop and change. So yeah, it stayed amicable. Yeah, I think a lot of the awkwardness was probably just perceived within my own head of maybe the politics of it, which I don't know, maybe just didn't exist. But I don't know, it was never really sort of verbalized and stuff. And I just kind of cracked on and got on with the role.
That's good. I mean, it's always better, yeah, because I've definitely been in those positions where there's like been a weird kind of role switching, and that can be hard. And it's interesting too, because I've been told that, like, I always tell people the CTO, the thing that surprised me about CTO work is that it's so much more sales oriented than you realize, sales and product oriented than you realize. And sometimes you find yourself doing that thing that engineers hate, which is like trying to sell like the thing that you don't have built yet, and you're like, but I'll rally the team, we'll get it. And it's like, and you're like, I know that I used to hate this, but we really need this contract right now, and you all don't realize how badly we need this contract right now, and so we got to make it work. And so it becomes a very different rallying cry. And so I wanted to contrast that though, because there's also like a role of like a VP of engineering that people have talked about, and I always kind of separate these two things, because I've had to pick teams, and I've said, is this person more engineering operations, or are they kind of more in this visionary kind of space? And would you agree, is that kind of that separation? And at what point do you find that now I got to bifurcate even further, because you do play both, I think?
Yeah, I mean, I was I always align. I hadn't been a manager before, and I kind of figured, okay, how can I figure out how to be a good leader? And I did what I could with very little experience. And I thought, how would I personally like to be led? Maybe if I try that as just like a first experiment. So I will try not to be a dick. I will lead from the front versus man from the back. Like, there was no wrong way and right way. It was more, okay, here's how I would like it, and here's what I would respond to better. Maybe I'll try that, and then I'll basically just assess feedback if and when it comes in. And people seem to quite respond quite well to it. Yeah, the visionary thing, I've always been more interested in, I would say, excitable about product. So it took me a while. I mean, I found coding, and that was like mind blowing, just the concept that you could write code and build stuff. But for me, I was always just quite excitable about, the ideas that could come into fruition and kind of manifest. And I carried that through all the way through. And in discussions with, other teammates or the founder or, hiring or whatever, it was always, here's what we're building, here's why it's exciting. And then I've always kind of described it as just, after we all have that discussion, I might be the one that goes away and happens to build the API bit of it, or maybe does the front end stuff. So yeah, I would say I was less traditionally, it was more unfamiliar, a little less comfortable for me to do more of the day-to-day operation side of it. There was a few situations where I actually found the first startup, the dynamic, quite interesting, because I'd always worked under the founder on his team, and he'd always be the one, in the engineering manager role or the founder role or whatever it may be, and he would often be quite happy doing the, running the stand-ups and kind of working with assigning tickets to people and fleshing out tickets and the kind of, the operations side of things. And that was one of the wake-up calls that I had quite early on when we started hiring for the first startup. Was seemingly I was quite happy unintentionally to let him take a lot of that stuff. And there was an occasion where I just let things fall a little bit, and an engineer reached out to him and basically like, what am I supposed to be doing? And he was like, I clearly see that Ben has not like communicated that to you, or like what you're supposed to be doing, or what's next on your like roadmap, and sorted it out, and then relayed that to me. And yeah, I mean, he like handled it well, but it was essentially, here's where I think you're falling short. Here's where I could do with you taking more stuff off my plate so I can concentrate on kind of running the business and partnerships and investments and stuff. But it was almost one of those insidious things where I kind of just let it keep going in the subconscious hope that, we'll just fit into our pieces that we've been in this dynamic before. I'll carry on just getting my head down and building, and we'll all be good. So yes, it was almost like I was a little bit more reluctant to do the operations side of things. And that was just a gradual process. I could gradually just kind of accepted that as part of my day, and ended up kind of just thinking mentally like, okay, allocate this percent to this kind of activities, and beware. Like I had different engineers in different time zones, so that kind of it became for me more about unblocking people. That became my kind of MO as like a CTO, was unblock the team, figure out what might be in their way, how I can speed things up, and then we'll kind of, through these different actions I can take, we'll all be able to move forward quicker and better. So it was less about my kind of individual kind of contribution. So that's how I found to kind of more love and become more familiar with the operation side of things. I was like, this is just another way I can kind of unblock people. Whereas before it might have been seen to me as kind of just, I don't know, unimportant admin. It just wasn't that interesting to me, the operation side of things. But yeah, some people seem to, be built for, like they're super organized and they're really good at operations. That's not me. I had to try and sort of incorporate it and find a way to bring it in a bit better.
For sure. I definitely kind of fall into that too, is sort of a messier worker, I'd say. Some people are very into that, like very exacting in the agile methodologies and the boards and all of that. And they so you mentioned now you had team members in different time zones. So were you working with kind of an outsourced team also? Is that kind of what was happening?
No, so this was the first one. So the first one, I was the only one in the UK for the first couple of years. Then we hired someone, again, from our past company that we both worked with. He was based in London, so that put me and him in the same time zone, which is great. Most of the team were US based, so we had most people West Coast as well. So we had like the full 8-hour split. The second one was more split, so that was... there were two great engineers based over in India who had reached out to the founder and were just like, in the startup, we absolutely have to work for it. Like, we would love to work for it. And he was like, okay, let's do it. And they both turned out to be great. One was great at iOS. One was more API, GraphQL stuff and straight software engineer. But Yeah, so the timing was weird. So I would wake up and they both had been online for like they're 5 hours behind the UK. So they were ahead of me in terms of work output by like 5 hours. So I was catching up on like, okay, have you got stuff to review? Like let's go through that. Let's like unblock you for the next project kind of thing. So I'd work with those guys in the morning. Then I'd have my kind of quiet time when they would log off and spend time with families for a bit. I'd have my bit in the middle of the day where it was just me. The rest, everyone else was US based. And then sort of my afternoon, people would start to trickle online. So then my kind of meetings and collaboration and like, you know, founder stuff would kind of ramp up again. And then it would be about kind of setting stuff, you know, to make sure that when everyone logs on the next morning, again, it was like that cycle of constantly just trying to stay ahead of everyone. Catch up when I wake up and they're already online, and managing all that. So yeah, that was kind of like, it was tricky, but I mean, it just fell into a rhythm of trying to, yeah, I think I've worked remotely now with teams and companies for, I think 10 years, it's over 10 years, like 12, 13 years. I think you just tend to fall into a rhythm of when's the kind of hot hours of when collaboration is the highest and just make the most of them. And then learn to, you know, actually now I've got a quieter period and I can kind of get my head down and not have to worry about being so available and stuff like that. So yeah, every time zone presents its own challenges, but yeah, we found a way to make it work.
Very cool. Yeah, I've always struggled with that part. You know, I've done. We've had people as far away as like I want to say UK, Lebanon, Romania, and then like coming around to California. I always found like completely on the other side of the world was too crazy because I'd basically be asking them to work the most insane hours in the world, or like I had to be up at 8 in the morning to take calls or really late at night and. I just was like, I can't make that sacrifice. Like, it's like you know, like I got kids at home. It's just like they need me at those times. So I'm always fascinated by people who make like the complete around the world thing work all the time because I've always found like a super struggle with outside time zone. If I can even keep everyone on the East Coast, I'm like on Eastern Standard. I'm even more excited on that because even just to California, sometimes you're like. We gotta I got to do everything in the afternoon. It can't just be like I can't just ping you at like just during the regular workday. So it changes, and especially when you're all remote now, it's everything is remote now. But I sometimes miss the in-person collaboration a little bit. You know,
that was like a bit. Well, it's a bit of a luxury. Like, we're all distributed. You know, I guess like the money we saved on not having like a central office or something. Once a quarter or so, we just flew everyone and kind of got together. So we spent a week, we rented somewhere, and we used those weeks of face-to-face time, well, just to spend time with each other and just like, you know, sort of hang out and have face-to-face, but also work on stuff that would then sort of set up the next 3 months worth of work kind of thing. So it would be a little bit more strategic or, you know, like which area, now we're on the same room, like which areas of the business are we kind of like falling short on, like broken processes and stuff like that. So we'd make the most of those weeks together and then everyone kind of like ping back off to their... It was always, I noticed like we'd spend a week together, we'd grab coffee together and then I'd come back to my office in here and we're like, oh, there's no one to talk to again. Back to the kind of isolation and stuff of that. But yeah, it's, I found every quarter was a nice rhythm of getting everyone together.
Cool. So now taking it to the book too, what would you say was the hardest lesson that you had to learn in those years?
In those years, there was probably the same answer to which were the hardest bits of the book to write. I gave myself this lofty goal, which I wanted to interject at the start, but I didn't. But like, by no means am I comparing myself to the quality of Bourdain's writing, so don't expect that. But yeah, Kitchen Confidential like blew my mind when I read it, and I wanted to have that as an aim of like just somewhere along the same path of. I didn't want to sugarcoat anything, and I didn't want to hide behind any kind of posturing or like pomp or anything. So it was the hardest lessons were kind of for both the book and those times where being honest with myself what my weaknesses were and where I was falling short. Because I think for the longest time, or for quite a long time, or for the initial part of the 2 gigs or the first gig, it was all about feeling a sense of imposter syndrome, like, oh crap, like I've pushed for this title, I've pushed for this role, now I've got to figure out how to do it, and people are depending on me, and Runway's depending on me. And it was a massive discomfort at showing weakness, or maybe admitting where I had weak spots. But the more I found that the more I leant into that and was more honest about those, even to myself or verbally to others, it meant that stuff got solved better and quicker. So we would identify gaps in knowledge or experience where we might need to hire or beef up on some way. So it was the hardest lesson was where am I, or how am I getting in the way of progress, and then kind of being okay with being like, I'm basically I'm the bottleneck. How can we figure out how I'm not the bottleneck? In some instances, it turned out to be like a lack of certain experience in in security. Like security, the first one was, I mean, they were both kind of fintechs, but the first one, a lot of the security stuff was just not my expertise. So we brought in a hire who was purely a security expert and almost had almost like an in-house kind of pen testing guy who was just great at security. And we'd go through rounds of review, and I'd come up with like these crazy nonsense ideas of how we could do stuff, and he'd be like, no, there's so many holes in that. But that then obviously led to like a more secure product and whatever. So it was that. And then more in the second startup, I noticed that my default was to build and output and build features. But we built up like this great team of engineers, and I was having my finger in all those pies, and I didn't quite need to. So it was a gradual thing, but it was more beneficial for everyone on the team that if I sort of stepped away from having to be involved in everything, and we then had mini cross-functional teams which would take a whole feature, and I wouldn't really be involved at all, other than doing usual things like reviewing code and PRs and stuff. And then I collaborate if the engineers wanted to and stuff. But yeah, the hardest lessons were how am I getting in the way? Like where are my weak spots? Where are my weaknesses? And then being okay with sort of articulating those, communicating those. And I think it's important. I mean, I think you should always be able to do that, but I think if you can recognize that maybe you're in environments or teams where that's a bit more welcomed. I've been on teams where that's not so welcomed, and everyone's kind of upholding this. No one makes mistakes, and we're all kind of perfect. And I found them trickier environments to be in and trickier teams to be in. Where I found that if there's like environments are a bit more accepting and kind of less blame heavy, then people seem okay with admitting stuff or that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was quite a hard lesson to learn. It's like, how am I halting progress in some way?
Yeah, I had to step away. And I guess also because you kind of come in as the senior engineer, there are things that you own that now you need to hand off.
Mm-hmm.
People are probably asking questions about those things. Mm-hmm. And so you're like, oh, well, I'll take care of it. And all the good stuff. And you sort of sit on this cusp, and we're all on this cusp now where like with AI coming mm-hmm. in, it's like everything was handwritten, and now nothing, almost nothing is handwritten. And like you talk about the code review, and you're like, well, I'm definitely not going to review this PR, like this is you kind of have to. The entire approach has changed to building stuff, which is so different.
Yeah, it's I'm interested. Like it's and it seems to be growing or changing exponentially. Like I can remember a year ago I was sort of pasting back and forth random snippets of code and hitting just boringly but just things are changing at such a rapid pace. I think if I'd have had the same tools now, like what those roles would have looked like and how that might have affected hiring and outside expertise and things like that. So yeah, I'm deeply interested in just, it feels like we're in a transition period and we've not quite settled on what the modern way of software engineering or product development looks like. And I'm interested to see where we land on that. It's definitely feel like it's changed from this through this grey area to what is the other side of that grey area I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's right, because even you talked about the Infosec story, and that's like a great example of like in the previous world you definitely would have needed an Infosec person, but now you sort of can let AI get you pretty far in, like, because now a lot of folks are going to be like, oh no, you can't let AI. Well, first of all, AI can pen test pretty well, but maybe you still want people there. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of it that's just like legalese. Like, we just need a bunch of policy documents, and like, you know, like the engineers all have to sign when they come in. And this would have been like a really costly endeavor for a startup before, to basically get somebody's boilerplate with their like a company name swapped out. And people don't realize how much of Infosec, like of that early stuff, ends up being that, or like a contract. You get like a contract with another company that's, oh hey, these are the things that we need to make sure your engineers are adhering to, and you're like, well, we didn't background check everybody, so now we got like, and so like, you know, you're like reading through this, and so you like, you can use AI to help build like, well, now we need to background check everybody, everybody's got to get on a 2-factor auth, here's how we're going to ensure it. And there's a lot of it that's just process and policy, that's just best practice that the startup just didn't consider before. Like, we just hire people we trust.
No, totally, I agree. Yeah.
You know, it's like, I didn't know you'd been to jail. No, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of that starts to come up. That's what I found comes up at some point. You're fractional, or you're just starting out. None of that comes up, and then suddenly you get this big contract, and they are like, hey, we need to make sure your company is doing all these things. And it's not penetration testing of the software. It's like penetration testing of the organization.
Yep.
Literally things that you'd see in Mr. Robot. Like, if you pick up a thumb drive, you're not allowed to plug it into your computer. Like things like that.
Yeah.
So very, very, very wild transition that I've seen myself in this business. So we're in this transitionary period. We talked a little bit about hiring. We both kind of agree, like, you sort of have these gut feelings now, but what is the hiring process going to be like now that AI enters the fold? Like, what would you do differently today than you had done before? Would you let people use AI tools? Would you not? Is it required? How would you reconcile it?
It is tricky because certain problems almost just kind of go away. You know, I've actually never been particularly great at like leak code interviews or sort of live coding interviews. It's just an environment which it doesn't suit me or doesn't gel with me. Like, I just don't tend to produce my best work. And I'm like, God damn, like, I really didn't show off my best skills there. But, you know, like, you can feed that leak coded problem into AI, and like, there's a solution. What are we assessing here? Are we assessing, like, can I get to the solution, or like how I think about problems? And I think, you said it earlier, like, AI can get you really far, and I think it really can. Like, that would definitely affect my decision making with hiring, or who to hire, or, you know, what person to hire, just in terms of sort of skills, like, not a particular type of person, but that the little gap at the end of that, like, it can get you really far, and then what? Like, for me, there's like a little bit of a cliff at the end where it drops off, where, okay, maybe let's say it can get you to 93%. Like, well, who fills that 7% gap? And I think that I feel like that still needs to be great people, and whether that's the people who are orchestrating AI agents or whatever, you know, that may be, I still think you have to have great people to even direct AI. Like, the thing that AI lacks a lot is context and then real world experience. And I think there's things where, you know, I'm using AI and I'll have to nudge it in the right direction because I'll spot that the problem might be similar to the one I had 12 years ago when I had to get out of bed at 2 a.m. and I don't want to repeat that painful lesson. Like, there are like things in my nervous system which on a cellular level I'm like, like that I'll have some sense that the problem's over here, and AI is looking in like the very tight grep that it just ran in like these lines of code. So I think I personally found working with it as like an accelerant and a complement. There are definitely things where it's completely just replaced maybe a process that I have and I just don't have to worry about anymore. That's an AI thing now. But God, yeah, like going forward, like I'd be interested. I think it would be still wanting to. I think you still have to have like a good product sense. Like there are things which I don't think AI has yet to replicate, but probably potentially will at some point. but taste, experience, judgment, real world consequence. Like AI has no skin in the game. Like it's just predicting the next string of text. It's not going to get fired if it makes a bad call. It's not going to care that suddenly you stop subscribing to Anthropic or OpenAI or something, but I will. Like, I will make a bad call and potentially lose my job or whatever it may be. So I think the kind of skin in the game, the taste, the experience, I think if people will kind of settle on figuring out like where AI can slot in to maybe free them up to lean into more of those areas, and work with it strategically to speed up those things. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be. My personal, just quickly to skip back, is I always think a take-home test is personally just a bit better. Here's this challenge. Just go away, take a few hours, like have your coffee, put your music on that you like, come back tomorrow, next day, and we'll kind of just go through the solution. Just talk me through it. Like I don't really care, like almost what you came to. Just talk me through it. Where was your head at? Like what trade-offs did you make? And would I want to work with you again? Is kind of my gut. But yeah, it would be. But then use AI. But are you still going to have those good skills of taste and what's your experience and your judgment call and stuff like that? There's not a lot that AI can. You can't outsource a lot of that to AI without losing a lot of that human touch.
Yeah, I would say that that's actually a good point. Like if you had to talk through your solution and that was all, it really, if you had AI write it and didn't really think much about, like you tried to one shot, you wouldn't really be able to talk through the solution. You barely made any decisions, right? But so I think it's almost even easier to do I always liked it. So when I was younger, I used to like the take home. And then after I had kids, I go, no, let's do 1 hour time box. Like I was like, I got an hour, because if I do the take home, I'm gonna do too much. And like even though they say like only take 3 hours on it, you're always like, well, what's someone else gonna do on it? So like you're always gonna try and do your best work, which is maybe a quality in and of itself. So I was always like, I'll take the in-person interview. And
that makes sense.
I used to tell people though, you got to do a few. I used to treat it like not that I ever did stand-up comedy, but I imagine it's like that, where I was like, just go and bomb a bunch, like go apply to a couple of companies you don't care about.
Yeah.
Bomb those interviews, and then, and go in with the headspace, like I'm going to bomb it. You're going to do better than you think you are, but you kind of get that. It's mostly getting the nerves out.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I used to do a thing where I'd say, hey, I'm going to type and you'll just explain your solution to me. So I'll look like the idiot. And like when I mess things up, so you don't have the nerves are not there. You just got to guide me through, because I always hired for that even before AI. Which was, I need to know your like the product sense is so important, because that's where I find that's where a lot of the bottlenecks happen. Like if I write up a crappy ticket, the person who's got, and now the word of the year is probably taste. Everybody, I didn't really have a word for it back then, but I used to say like the person who can just read between those lines and make a good decision. That's not like, so you had like two types of engineers. You had the engineer who was like, I'm not going to do anything until all my questions are answered. That was terrible for an early stage startup. Like especially like that, I was like, listen, we cannot have work halted until like I get back from whatever I'm doing to answer those questions. Then there's the person who just makes really, really bad decisions, and there's no way. I guess that you want to know that up front too. And then there's people who make, hey, that was pretty good. Like, you know what, the designer may come back and want to make a few tweaks, but you almost hit the mark, or and we're close enough that we can deploy this thing. And I always found that was such a key to removing bottlenecks, and it's even more key now.
Like I my sense is I feel like engineers tend to fall on like a speed and accuracy spectrum, and neither end is bad, but either end I find are more suited to, like we said at the start, more the IBMs and the early stage. The beginning, I'd much rather work with someone who skews more on the speed angle. I've worked with engineers who you spec something out and they've built most of it super quick, and it's not the most refined, it's a little bit messy, but there's something real and tangible that we can then go through and we can click around or whatever it may be. And I just find that the forward progress and the forward momentum tends to win out in those early days, especially. versus the more accurate of the engineer. Then when you come, later, you might want someone who can like do a deep, thorough dive on like a specific scaling issue or like a complexity thing. But yeah, I feel like for me, yeah, I would personally rather work with someone I can kind of get that forward momentum with, who's making like pretty good calls, like across the board, like judgment wise, and I can see stuff like they're outputting stuff. So yeah, that became important as well.
That's like an agency thing too. I think you learn that skill in agency work, which we both have done. And I tell people all the time, I like engineers that can work directly with the customer. And I said one of the reasons I think is because that sense of I need to show something. If you know you have to like meet the customer that day, you're like, you know what? Like I better get this into some kind of a state that I can keep producing, because you can always kind of get, as long as the customer sees the forward progress, there's nothing worse than being a non-technical person and it feels like nothing's happening, where they're like, well, I got it deployed to EC2 and I set up the Git repo. That might have taken a bunch of time. Yeah. But from the customer standpoint, they're like,
nothing's
happened. Really happened?
Yeah.
Anything really happened?
I can't feel it. I can't touch it. Like, what am I paying for? So yeah, I never really thought about that, but yeah, my early agency days, but I don't know, maybe they did kind of thread through. But yeah, I always just want to be outputting stuff so everyone can see it. Like from like here I've done stuff, and now we can review it, we can give feedback and stuff, and keep that feedback loop tighter. So yeah, that seemed to work pretty well.
Right, you get it in front of them, and then there's a whole bunch of pipelines and things you want to do, but the customer's not going to give you feedback like within it. Usually it gets in front of the stakeholders, whether that's internal or external, and they're sitting on it for a few days. So then you could do all that stuff, that stuff you wanted to do. But at least now you got the email out, it's in front of them. And so that was another thing about working, was like, I'm always like working these vertical slices, which I think was such a big push for full stack, for like front to back. Yeah. And not to like throw shade, but for the back end engineers, unfortunately, like if you build out a whole API and then like show a Postman collection to a client, it's like they're like, okay, like I still feel like nothing got done. Yeah. So I'm always like working that vertical slice, let them log in, let them make the account, then just keep pushing that out. You're always going to have this lag time between when they get it. And it's this dance between kind of producing and then refactoring, and producing and refactoring, and you learn that showsmanship. I think that frustrates a lot of engineers, and I feel like that was like going back to our earlier part, which is when you come from an almost non-engineering background, you're kind of okay with the dance a little bit of that. And I think that's like that was a big challenge as being a CTO. I think running this company is getting a lot of engineering types, and my early agency days, it was all about like separating the engineers from the client. There was always these like layers of management just sitting in between everything, and trying to remove those, I felt just kind of helped refine this whole process, where there wasn't just all this human friction in between things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, when you work at a company and there's you just started and there's 100 people who are, crazy about your product and stuff like that, all the layers get removed and the stuff you're pushing is like immediately in their hands. And yeah, it's like, it's very rewarding and challenging, but you're like constantly at that edge of being exposed at all times. Like stuff you're working on is going to be in people's hands later today or tomorrow or stuff. So yeah, that whole produce, refactor. I think also a personal motivation of mine was I never wanted to be the bottleneck, and that probably came from like an earlier imposter syndrome of I don't want the spotlight on me at all, so I'll work as quickly as I can to produce something, and phew, that's back off my plate. At least not on my plate. No one's gonna wait for me, so I'll get it done and like back out into the ether or whatever. So that definitely threaded through years later.
Very, very, very true. Very true. So we're rounding third base here. We're kind of like been out. I'm saying, what are you up to now? So you're writing the book. Are you looking for the next CTO guy? Are you looking to do it again? Are you kind of building your own thing? Where are you at right now?
I'm all over the place a little bit. Like I definitely reached at the end of those 5 years. I needed a break. I felt like I threw myself in for 4.5, nearly 5 years. It took a lot from me, but I gave a lot and I got a lot, and it was all a big melting pot of like a great experience. And I can look back at it now fondly. But I definitely needed a break at the time. I think right now, so I'm doing consulting work for the UK government, which is as different as you can from like working for a US startup. So that's been a fun change of pace. Wrote the book. I'm working on my own. I released this free fake API like 10 years ago, and didn't look at it for 5 years. And I opened up Cloudflare and thought, oh crap, like there's millions of people using it each month. So I've been spending a bit of time just now, I've got Claude Code and AI tools. I thought, okay, like there may be some like market. And that was the problem, was I had no clue who was using it. It was all anonymous. So now I've put like a paid tier in. I've added like a bunch of products, and you can pretty much, you could use it as like a no-code backend thing. So you just spin up a backend, and it will handle everything from database and security and stuff. So you just send requests to it. So I'm having some fun. I sort of getting involved in the marketing stuff and the kind of solo founder stuff with that. So yeah, I think I'm always going to be interested in a great, like the teams I worked with over those 5 years, like just some of the best times working with the best team and stuff. So I think there's always a pull and an itch in me to work on something which is that early for a great idea. But yeah, right now I'm experiencing different changes and challenges of life and work. So yeah, here I am.
Very, very, very cool. Well, it's nice to get some time away, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked two questions at the end of every episode. One of them is, what advice would you give to new engineers today coming into this world?
That's tricky, and I feel like a year ago my answer would have been different. But I still think if you can develop some form of not innate, but that's because that's inaccurate, but like a good product sense. Find a way to develop the skills which don't maybe rely so much on I can write good code, because I think for a long time that was a key differentiator, and I think that maybe has now, it's just a bit more murky. It's not gone away entirely. It's just a bit more murky and a bit more diluted. I think some of the other skills that previously maybe engineers didn't need to have, because they could write great code, and maybe I would suggest developing them. Whether it is just getting comfortable talking to customers and doing user research or customer research, or getting, I don't know, a bit more interested in, I don't know, marketing stuff, marketing products. I feel like it's gonna go towards a lot more people being the one-person business, a solo founder who has got a bunch of maybe AI agents who are writing the code and creating content and stuff like that. So I would say, yeah, develop the other sort of softer skills, or the skills you were maybe shying away from, that are now, I think, just going to be a bit more important than they used to be. 'Cause I think, for good or for bad, I think outputting good code is going to be a little bit more of a commodity than it was before. And that's going to be interesting. So the other side of that, I think, yeah, having those skills to round your whole value, or what you can deliver, is going to be pretty key.
I definitely would agree. I think that's kind of the thing I'm looking for when I bring people in, and I've definitely seen it. So it's sound advice, I'd say. Then of course, last question. Besides your book, The First CTO,
yeah,
any books you would recommend that you're reading now that you think are good career books, or helpful on the path to becoming a CTO as well?
That's a very good question. I would say, I'd pull like a few ones from outside the industry. I think, that's the problem. There are just great books around.
It could be a philosophy book, like honestly, anything. Yeah, anything.
Oh, there's definitely a few of those. There's ones like the Power of Now, the Eckhart Tolle one. Kitchen Confidential. Like, you just want an entertaining read. Just seeing inside of an industry, and just great writing as well. That would be one. I do want to mention that I think it was the Basecamp guys. Their early ones, like Rework and another one.
Yeah.
Those ones, I found those really good.
I loved those.
So I tend to find books I get a lot from where people are talking about early experiences. There's like the Twitter one, the Instagram one, like a bunch of stuff like that. Like if you can try and, I guess, getting inside the head of people who have been through stuff, and then they're willing to share those early thoughts and lessons. Yeah,
Yeah, I think Rework is definitely, that was on my list as a great product book, as well. Like yeah, you bring up Kitchen Confidential. I always, that's a great book. I said, if you really want to have that experience, I think you have to bias towards like hiring a bunch of degenerates, which is how restaurants get such great stories. So you can throw that into your interview process.
Yeah.
And you'll have some fun in the software space. But Ben, this was awesome. This was great.
Thank you.
And the last thing to mention, where can people find you if they want to follow you, hear more?
I don't have to. I have LinkedIn, so just Ben Howdle on LinkedIn. I've got benhowdle.im as my portfolio site. Yeah, they'll find me there.
Perfect.
Be good.
Excellent. LinkedIn it is, and we'll link all of this in the show notes. As always, Ben, amazing talking to you.
Thank you
so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks very much.